What up, Wizards? It's Deb from The Place, and I need a lint roller. I probably should have thought of that before I got all those cats. But today, we're going to do a list that we've only been doing for a couple of seasons now, but I enjoy it more the more I get to do it. This is always a fun one, and today we get to do it with a decidedly commandery set. Let's look at the top 10 EDH cards in Spider-Man.
And I'm your favorite Magic Channel's favorite Magic Channel. Best believe that the professor go bananas for my deck tech.
And we're back on the World Wide Web to offer some pro whips for the Spider-Man set in Commander. That was the worst joke of the season by far. Who writes this stuff? Oh yeah, me. Technically, I guess. I don't write anything down. I think I've only ever written one script out for a video ever in 10 years. I mostly just kind of sit down and say stuff. Speaking of which, I got 3 honorable mentions for this list today, and they're all kind of Commander sleepers, which I'm excited to get to. But real quick first, a word about this list. Not from our sponsors. You probably thought I was going to say, like, a word from our sponsors. I don't like to do sponsors. I'm nobody's pitch man. I don't like to sell people's crap or whatever. So I guess if you respect that about the channel, hit up the Patreon link in the description, just $1 a month. But anyway, real quick about this list, you're probably going to be expecting to see a few cards on here that don't end up showing up on the list, and you're going to be like, what's that about? Well, it's because I don't like to repeat entries between lists during the preseason or whatever, and I've already done some cards like With Great Power and Strength of Will in the Standard Sleepers video. I thought they were a fun case, a hotter take for the Standard Sleepers video than the Commander video. And you might be looking for stuff like Spider Punk, which makes stuff uncounterable. It's really good. Or like Spider Woman, which really annoys all of your opponents and makes their mana rocks and stuff come into play tap. Those are very likely going to show up on the top 20 competitive list in a day or two's time. So if you don't see some stuff on this list that you expected to see, that probably explains it. But that just frees up a bunch of slots on the list for stuff that is kind of more purely Commander and fun. Also opens up room for more like kind of narrow stuff that I'm excited about, like our first honorable mention, which is Alien Symbiosis. Not a single alien in Edge of Eternities. In the Spider-Man set, we get an alien reference. I'm going to drop that, but either way. This is a black aura that can come back from your graveyard for a cost, and that cost is discarding a card, which could actually be kind of an upside a lot of the time. You know, we just got the Mayhem mechanic in this set. We've already had the Madness mechanic. You can flash back a card that you've discarded. You can harmonize a card you've discarded, and 100 other ways to get value out of your graveyard. But one thing I actually really like about the discard mode on this is there's not a whole lot of stuff in Magic history, like at all, that allows you to discard a card because of a thing that's in your graveyard. Usually it's an effect in play or a card in your hand or a thing you cast that lets you discard things. This is just sitting in your graveyard and it's a discard outlet, and that is actually very rare. What I really like for this is the Ariette of the Charmed Apple deck. You know, it's yet another aura that you can play out of your graveyard, and it has a few, especially in white, but there are not very many of these in black. Mourning comes to mind as one of the more popular ones in Ariette and other like Orzhov Enchantress lists and stuff. But again, this is not an effect you see super often in black on an aura, so it's just good to have another one. Another honorable mention I wanted to point out briefly is Madam Web over here. This has got to be better than the movie. You know, I've never seen the movie. Maybe everyone on the internet is wrong. They so often are, but one way or the other. This is 6 mana. That's the downside to a thing like this, obviously, but so is Bolus's Citadel. Did I just compare Madam Web to Bolus's Citadel? Yeah, you bet your biscuit I just did. I know it's kind of a wild comparison, but, you know, this is in blue and rather than black, and I think that's kind of important. You can't just go off and play every card in your deck with the Madam Web, but you can't do that with a Bolus's Citadel either. Like, you'll run out of life eventually, and you'll like hit 2 lands in the same turn eventually, just like you eventually will with the Madam Web. So, I don't know, man. It's nowhere near as good as a Citadel, but for an uncommon that's probably going to end up being like 25 cents when it all settles down, I think this is a pretty decent investment, especially for certain blue mages whose decks are just full of non-creatures. I mean, that's literally everything but creatures. You know, like you play artifacts, enchantments, planeswalkers, instants, sorceries, battles. It's everything but creatures. That's quite the spread. So I actually think Madam Web could have some playability, especially in like casual or budget Commander decks. But I think there's a chance that this is even better than that. But my final HM is like my actual honorable mention. This goes beyond just like a Commander sleeper. I think this is actually an amazing card. It's Rhino's Rampage. Brought this card up a couple of times this previous season. I've made no bones about the fact this card I really like in perhaps multiple formats, especially depending on whether or not there are artifacts you need to smash up. And in Commander, there always are. So this is like 1 mana for an definite 2-for-1, like most of the time. You can always find a creature to pick off with it, and you can always find an artifact to pick off with it as well. And it can target any artifact, by the way. You don't have to hit something that's like controlled by the player whose creature you hit or any nonsense like that. Just any old artifact in the world. You can hit Jason's creature with this and then take out Trini's artifact, and Zach's over here like, good play. I don't know why I'm playing Commander with the Power Ranger, but you see what I'm saying. 1 mana for a 2-for-1 that's this easy to cast too, for what that's worth, is just a gold star card in Commander. I think this is going to end up seeing a lot of play. Let's get on to number 10 here. The actual list starts with the Clone Saga, with a little bit of consideration for Chameleon Master of Disguise. Apparently, Wizards has just decided the moment that they get the reins of the Commander environment that, you know what, the whole legend rule thing's kind of dumb. You know, what if we just broke that on several cards in the same set? Let's try it out and see what happens. I think that both of these are pretty decent, man, especially in some ways Chameleon. Right now, if you want the Clone Saga, it's like $25 pre-order. Don't pre-order cards. It's always more expensive than you want it to be. That said, Chameleon is like $2. So it's like literally 10 times less to get a copy of Chameleon. And it's in a lot of ways cheaper if you can mayhem it into play or whatever. And it too breaks the legend rule. Chameleon's a good card. But Clone War, that's a Star Wars thing, isn't it? The Clone Saga, rather. I'm going to make that mistake a lot, aren't I? Really good stuff about this card, sure. We'll have to wait and see what it actually does in Commander, but this is one that I really want to point out because of how much they're trying to break the legend rule in this set, and I think these are basically 2 of the best cards that do it. Now, number 9 here is Silk Web Weaver, with, again, special consideration for Spider-Man India. These are both Selesnya creatures that trigger whenever you cast a creature, which you should be doing a lot of. And I honestly think Spider-Man India is another kind of Commander sleeper here. It's going to be really cheap at the end of the day, I think. Again, once things settle down. To own a copy of Spider-Man India, he's got amazing hair, so you got that going for you. But also, I think anything that triggers in a Selesnya deck, especially when you cast a creature spell, is worth looking at. And this one makes, Spider-Man India larger. And importantly, it just throws around flying. You cast 2-3 creature spells in a turn, half the team has flying, and now you can actually get in on somebody. I think that's actually a couple of good abilities. But when it comes to Silk over here, Silk the Shocker, this I'm not necessarily shocked to see a version of. It's in some ways just a worse Torrens, right? But it can go in a Torrens deck, or Torrens can go in the 99 of it if you want to, and now you've got this redundant effect that triggers whenever you cast a creature and puts more creatures on the table, which is always amazing. Also, while we're in Selesnya, it works really well with Kyler, and I might get this name wrong because I've only seen this card like twice in my life, but I think her name is Bess. Fairly certain, but these are both, creatures that care when other creatures come into play, and then they do something to make those creatures even larger. And in this case, with both Bess and Kyler and Bess, sounds like a TV show or something, but either way, both of these can end up making all of those little dudes absolutely enormous. So I think that is pretty awesome. In humans decks, Silk works. That's one of the reasons it works so well with Kyler, is because Kyler cares about humans. Silk makes humans. So again, there's a lot of awesome Selesnya stuff you can do with Silk, whether again she's your commander or she's just a random 99 card in Selesnya tokens. I think she's got a life ahead of her. Now my number 8 is a card that's really only on the commander list because it has to be. It's Web of Life and Destiny. Maybe inarguably the most commander-ish card in the entire set, but I think there's a couple of contenders coming up here on the list, so hold your horses on that assessment. But yeah, Web of Life and Destiny is not a card that I have all of the confidence in the world in, but I do think that in Commander, that's going to be the perfect format for it. It shouldn't be too hard to get this down for 4 mana a good bit of the time, and then once you do, you've got incredible value for the rest of the game. And I don't have the faith in this that a lot of people do, and I can tell a lot of people do because the card is currently $60 to pre-order, which is one of the most expensive cards in the set. It keeps showing up on people's best lists, and I guess it showed up on mine too because I want to respect it a good bit because, the moment you hit an 8-drop off of this, it's not like you win the game immediately, which I guess is another point against it. But if you can hit 6-drop one turn, 7-drop the next, 4-drop the next, then you're going a long way towards winning the game. And I think the card is going to do that more times than not. So again, you got to respect it for sure. This is a great commander card. Let's move on to number 7 here, which is Mr. Negative. I think this is actually just a really interesting card, whether again, it's your commander or it's in the 99. As a commander, it works really well with like blink effects, any ephemerate style effects. This is fantastic with, because you switch life total to somebody else. Maybe you draw some guards, maybe you put them at 2. I'm not really sure what you're doing with it, but either way, this can be a great card to blink. But there's a lot of other tricks with it, like Wall of Blood is one that costs like 25 cents and can go really well with Mr. N. Like all you got to do is pay life until you're at 1 and then switch life totals to somebody, which is pretty nasty. Also works great with any like Sanguine Bond effects, and there's a bunch of those throughout Magic at this point, and it does work. I feel like I've had to explain this a few times recently with different cards, but anytime your life total changes, whether it goes up or down, you have, per the rules, gained or lost life. If you're at 10 and you go to 20, you gain 10 life. If you're at 10 and your life total changes to 3, you lost 7 life. That's how the rules work. So if you Sanguine Bond and you put your opponent at 3 and you go up to 15 and you just gained, 12 life, then you'll also be able to deal 12 damage to them. So they should lose, theoretically, if you have a Sanguine Bond out or, again, any effect like it. That's great. Also works really well with any other life-paying effects. I've already pointed out Wall of Blood, which is the spiciest one, but, actual good cards you could play in your black deck, like Black Market Connections, which you're probably going to do anyway. It's really, really good with Mr. Negative. So even though this costs 7 mana, it does a lot when it hits the table, and it's surprisingly versatile. Number 6 should probably be number 1. I think this is number 1 on a lot of people's list. It's Imposter Syndrome. This costs an awful lot of mana to get down, but again, we're playing Commander. Like, why? I get it. Why play Madam Web when you can play Imposter Syndrome? It's the same mana cost, This does something the turn it comes into play, too, a lot of the time, which you can't say about all 6-mana enchantments. You can set up a good combat step with this, and then, if you don't win the game that turn, you are having the time of your life. Even if you have to say go, you had a lot of fun, and what else can you ask for? And maybe I should have lumped this in with Clone Saga and Chameleon, because this is yet another thing that just ignores the legendary rule. That's no big deal. Oh yeah, it's not legendary either. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. I'm not sure that it will, dog. There's a lot of fun setups with this, especially in blue where there's a lot of tricksy stuff going on. But you don't have to have a specific commander. I don't have to point out 5 dudes you can play with this card, because it's just kind of good if you have access to islands and you have some creatures in your deck. It might be worth playing this card, regardless of your list. But just in case you did want a specific guy to play this with, it's Felix 5 Boots. It's Felix 5 Boots. That doubles the triggers off of a thing that triggers when you deal combat damage, so you get double copies of guys, except they're not legendary. You play it with Felix 5 Boots. It's nuts. But we'll move on to number 5 here. Halfway down the list, we are looking at Rent is Due. A lot of people are excited about this for various competitive environments, and I guess I could see playing it on turn 4 in the right deck, but in Commander, this is wonderful. This is yet another white card draw piece. We keep seeing more of these, and at this point, we've seen enough of them that you have to judge them against one another to determine whether or not they're really good when you do see them, but I think this stacks up pretty well. You've got a little bit more time to develop your board state in Commander, so it's just more likely that you have ways of tapping down creatures, and for that matter, you have Smothering Tithe in white too to go with this. Yet another ridiculous white enchantment. So, there's ways to get treasure tokens in white that you can tap down to make sure this draws you the card every turn. For what it's worth, I think in Commander this is mostly 1 white mana to draw an extra card every single turn of the game. Not necessarily, Mystic Remora as far as 1 mana card draw engines go, but still a more than worthy one. So I think we'll see this in a lot of white decks moving forward. At this point, between, Smothering Tide, Trouble in Pairs, this, and 5 other white enchantments and white creatures, it's getting to the point where, God, it's more than that. 10 Esper Sentinel, it's getting to the point where, if you're building any deck with planes in it, regardless, not even mono white, just a 3-color deck that happens to have planes in there somewhere, there's 10 or 12 spots taken up by cards you just have to play. I don't know how I feel about that, but I think that Rent is Due is maybe the next in that long line. But my pick for the actual most Commander-ish card in the entire set is number 4, which is Spider-Verse. Now, first of all, ignore the spider text on this card, because I'm not really that worried about the spider text. I'm worried about that second line of text, which is where all the actual gas is in this tank. Whenever you cast a spell from somewhere other than your hand, you copy it. You only get to do it once per turn, but there's a bajillion ways, especially in red, to cast spells from somewhere other than your hand. Any impulse drawing, and most red Commander decks that don't have access to blue somewhere in their suite really lean heavily on impulse drawing, so shouldn't be too hard just because of that to get a lot of ridiculous value off of this, but obviously there's ways to cast cards out of your graveyard in red, not just flashback stuff, but, Underworld Breach and Return the Past, I think the name of the card is, and Past in Flames. There's like at least 4 ways to do this in red, like fairly easily, and, they're cards that a lot of decks play, so it would be great there, but I don't think 5 mana is too much to ask. I keep saying this is 6 mana, it's way too much, even in Commander. 5 mana though, I can get down with a little bit more, especially considering I could see this doing something the turn it came into play. Now in Standard, you could always plot something and then play it later for free or whatever. That seems kind of fun, right? But you can do that in Commander too. There's a couple of things that once they're in exile, you can kind of play them whenever you want, and they work really well with a card like this, just saying. But again, there's just so many ways to make this thing pop up, and even if it's only once a turn, this is crazy value that I think is very easy to work. But we're in the top 3, and here's my maybe actual number 1 card. Seriously, I probably should have just made this number 1. It's the card that I'm most excited to play in the whole set, in multiple formats. It's Shadow of the Goblin, Trial of the Dragon. What's a Persona 4 reference doing in my Magic the Gathering video? Either way, Shadow of the Goblin is a gross little Magic card that has 2 different kind of things that it does. It basically gives you a rummage, every single turn, and that means that you get a discard every single turn, which means you can turn on Madness, you turn on Mayhem, you turn on Reanimation. Again, there's plenty of things in this set and beyond in Magic history that care about you playing things from somewhere other than your hand. They really ramp that up in this set. But with this, you get to discard things and then maybe play those out of your graveyard and trigger all of those effects, including its own effect. It synergizes with itself in that way, because if you play a land or cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, you also ping everybody for 1, which doesn't seem amazing, but again, there's so much just like flashback stuff in red that this works really well with. But what I actually think this does is in the game, the turn that you get it out, or maybe a couple of turns later, because the aforementioned Underworld Breach and Return the Past and Past in Flames and all of these, and even like Yawgmoth's Will, if you got a copy of it in your Rakdos deck, all these things that let you play stuff out of your graveyard. Now you can stack those and just 1 mana spell here, 2 mana spell there, another 1 mana spell, and suddenly you've done like 8 damage to the table, and now you can cast Grape Shot, just storm off or whatever it is. I think this might actually be an important part of these like Underworld Breach packages if you actually want to finish the game in either a different way, or your deck doesn't finish the game that turn with Underworld Breach. Now it potentially can, or at least take 1 or 2 people out in that turn, especially considering any combat damage you can deal on that turn. So I don't know, man. I think that Shadow of the Goblin is great for like combo purposes in Commander, and it combos with some stuff that we already know is powerful. Not to mention how well it works with Obnix Silas, Captive Kingpin, that specific version of Obnix. It is insane with, so you'll definitely see it in that deck, but I think you'll see it in a bunch more before it's all said and done. This card just kind of does too many things for red decks especially, and Rakdos decks especially, to ignore. Now, everybody has a favorite commander from this set, but number 2 is mine, and probably yours based on the comments section. Number 2 is Norman Osborn over here. A couple of ways you can play this. You can play the 2 mana version out of your hand or out of the command zone, I guess. Probably how you're going to do it here. And you got like a kind of unblockable dude. He connives, so you get like a loot sort of. He can get larger too when he attacks in every turn. Like a neat little guy on, its front face. And it works really well with equipments and swords and like, anything that procs on combat damage. Just a wonderful dude. It's nice to have an not invisible stalker, but just like a cheap, unblockable dude in your command zone. I like that. But on the back half, which you can also play out of the command zone, by the way, or out of your hand if it's there, you can play the Grixis version of this card, which costs 4 mana. But look at this, these 2 crazy lines of text right here, This is like a Yawgmoth's Will on legs. There is so much that works with this, just like wheel effects. There's a lot cheaper effects in Wheel of Fortune. It's just like my favorite wheel card. I love that art. I love that art so much. But there's wheel effects that are 25 cents and work really, really well with Norman Osborn's like back half. But there's also like really cheap stuff. There's like Secrets of the Dead, which works with a few commanders in this set. But that's going to end up drawing you a lot of cards for really cheap because, you're casting cards for cheap. You just draw more cards. You discard those. You cast those for cheap. Nasty. Burning Vengeance is another kind of almost Shadow of the Goblin type thing that can deal a lot of damage to your opponents when you're casting stuff out of your yard. And for that matter, Shadow of the Goblin works really well with Norman Osborn or the Green Goblin too. That'll do a lot of damage to your opponents. You'll probably want to play Shadow in your Green Goblin deck. Only makes sense flavor-wise too. But either way, a lot of stuff works with this, and I wouldn't be surprised to see a ton of brews coming together over the next couple of months. Let's move on here to the final card. Number 1, what's it going to be? Now, I define my number 1 commander card in any of these videos as like the card that will see the most play across all commander decks until the end of time. And I think that my pick for number 1 this time might be a little bit cheap, but it definitely fits that definition. And it is a card that I believe will go in like more commander decks by and large than any other card in the set. Place your bets. It's the Daily Bugle. Seriously. This is a land that comes into play untapped, so extremely low opportunity cost. Taps for a colorless, but you can also make it give a legendary creature menace until end of turn. In Commander, you like basically always have access to a legendary creature, and even if you don't have your commander, you might have another legendary creature out. There's no rule that says you can't play other legendary dudes in your deck. This is evasion on a stick for very cheap with low opportunity cost that any deck can play, and any deck has a reason to play in Commander. And all that shapes up to be a pretty good looking card to me, and it's especially good looking considering you can get it for like $3 right now, and that's pre-order prices. So I'm pretty sure once the set is out, hits the streets, and gets open, you can get this card for 50 cents or something. And I think that's going to be a great deal. This is one of those cards I'm ordering right off the rip as soon as the set is available, because I think it's going to be relatively cheap. And again, basically any commander deck I'm building, I'll have to at least consider the card. Again, if your deck cares about menace, like you're building the J. Jonah Jameson commander deck or whatever, if your deck cares about menace, it's especially good. But I don't think your deck has to care about menace. It's just a fine Magic card, no matter what. But anyway, that's my take, y'all. Let me know how you felt about this list. Again, there's going to be some stuff you didn't see here. That's probably because it's on other lists. So check those out. Sub to the sandwich so you get the competitive video when it comes out. And check out the sleeper video. If you haven't seen it yet, I'll leave a link in the description for that. Again, I've got a Patreon. I don't do sponsors as of now, or as of yet. I haven't like dabbled in like channel memberships on YouTube or anything like that. So, I'm definitely not doing all the stuff I could do because it doesn't necessarily all feel right. So I guess if you want to, if you're like, hey, that's nice of you, then throw $1 a month on Patreon my way. It would mean a lot to me, and even just $1 a month from a few people watching this right now would go a massively long way towards sustaining the channel, which is becoming an actual problem. Don't be alarmed, but Patreon is basically the only way I keep being able to do this, and I'd really like to be able to keep doing this, and I know at least a few of you would also enjoy that. But I'm sure a couple of you would revel in my downfall, but that's just being a YouTuber, I'm just glad that you're watching, no matter who you are. Thank you for that, one way or the other. Let me know how you felt about the stuff, and do the YouTube things before you get out of here. Hit the like button, put it in more recommended feeds, hit subscribe for more content. I think we just got to 138K. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. That means a lot. We finally got there. We're trying to get to $150. Help us get there. Apart from that, Patreon stuff, and that's about it. So I'll catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.